because
This is a big.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to our event today. And I hope you have a wonderful day and enjoy our event. So greetings, everyone, student, faculty, staff, administrator, and community members. Welcome to the Bronx Community College first virtual National Voter Registration Day event. National Voters Registration Day is a nonpartisan civic holiday celebrating our democracy. First observed in 2012, it has quickly gained momentum ever since. Nearly 3 million voters have registered to vote on this specific holiday to date. It's a celebration on the fourth Tuesday of every September. This year, it's today, National Registration Voters Day. The holiday has been endorsed by the National Association of Secretaries of State, the National Association State Election Directors, the U.S. Election Assistance Commission, and the National Association of Elections Officials. On this day, we look to increase voter registration, mobilize volunteers, educate our citizens, and unite as a community. In today's agenda, we look forward to hearing from speakers such as our Bronx Borough President, President Ruben Diaz Jr., BCC's Criminal Justice Professor Leroy Gadsden, a BCC alumna, Ms. Kersey Martinez, the SGA members, and NYPRIG, and also known as the New York Public Interest Research Group. At the end, you'll be given an opportunity to connect with some of our today's presenters. Please direct any questions you have to Ms. Jasmine Cacavelli via the chat. I hope you have a wonderful event. And then, so to begin our programming, we're gonna have the Bronx Borough President speaking today, and he's gonna talk a little bit more on discussing the importance and significance of voting, particularly the millennials, also called Zoomers, because you know, we're Gen X, and we don't have that type of power of that the millennials have right now, right? And whether you're a US citizen or not, your voices are heard, will be heard. And remember, just by you attending today's event is a step forward to creating that community to make change. So I hope you have enjoyed our programming. Feel free to ask many questions. That way you could get all the resources that you would need for voting, right? So today we're gonna begin with our Bronx Borough President, and who is Bronx Borough President Ruben Diaz Jr. Today we have the pleasure and honor of being joined by our Bronx Borough President. Again, his name is Ruben Diaz Jr. Who first entered into public office as a member of the New York State Assembly in 1997, and is currently serving as his full term as Bronx Borough President, having been elected in November 2017 with more than 88% of the vote. Woohoo! As Bronx Borough President, Ruben Diaz Jr. has led the implementation of a robust agenda on economic development, housing, health and wellness, education, and public safety in every corner of the borough, whom some of us call home, the Bronx, right? Prior to his current role, Bronx Borough President Diaz served several terms in state legislature, During that time, he earned a reputation as a champion for working families in the Bronx and across New York State. He demonstrated a passion for constituent service, social advocacy, criminal justice reform, and community empowerment balanced with the support of sensible green economic development and job creation programs. Please put your virtual hands together for our Bronx Borough President, Ruben Diaz Jr.
Yay! Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Can everybody hear me? First of all, happy National Voter Registration Day. I hope everybody's registered to vote. But even more importantly than that, I hope that you are really out there telling your family and friends and neighbors and people in your community to do the same. We have until October 9th. First of all, let me just thank Bronx Community College for putting this together. I appreciate all of you tuning in. Special shout out to my buddy, your president, Mr. Negby, and all of the folks there, Eddie, everybody at BCC. Thank you all for having this important conversation. Now, I guess my job is here is to let everybody know the importance of voting. If you already tuned in, then you know that. But the question is, how are you able to convince other people of this importance? So what folks need to know is that voting is the fundamental, or one of the fundamental, if not the fundamental block of our democracy. Let's be honest here, let's keep it as they say where I come from, let's keep it 100, right? If you are Black, if you're brown, and if you're a woman, if you have studied on the civil rights movement, voters' rights, if you know about the women's suffrage movement, if you are out there championing the cause of immigrant reform or immigration reform, if you believe that there should be student loan reform or student loan forgiveness, if you believe in the fact that there's climate change, if you believe the scientists, if you see what's happening in the West Coast with all of the fires, if you are someone like me of Puerto Rican descent, and where my family comes from Puerto Rico, what happened 2 years ago with Hurricane Maria, and all of the hurricanes during this season, it's unprecedented amount of hurricanes in this season. If you believe in justice reform, if you out there screaming Black Lives Matter, like I believe Black Lives Matter, if you believe that there's economic inequality, if you believe in systemic racism, if you or your loved ones or anybody that is around you or your economic status has been negatively impacted by COVID and the lack of response of the federal government, then you don't have the luxury of staying home. You don't have the luxury of staying home. If you believe that Black Lives Matter and Latino lives matter and women's rights, then the lives that are unfortunately no longer with us, who fought for so many decades so that we can have this right, not a luxury, you cannot stay home. And it's not just about you, it's how is it that you motivate other people to do the same. You can't hide behind the excuse, well, oh, my vote doesn't count, or my vote doesn't matter. It matters who's in office. And we have clear evidence of that. I mean, I don't want to get too political here. I want people to register to vote, but I'm gonna keep it one, I'm a Democrat. So for me, if you believe in democratic values, and if you believe that it matters who's in office, all you got to do is see who's the person at 1600 Pennsylvania today and compare that individual to our former president. If you tell me that there's not a difference, then I don't know what rock you've been hiding under for so many years. If you look at how the city is being run today and what you think it could be run like, then it matters who's in office. And that's at the national level. At the local level, please understand this, and I teach this all the time when I visit schools. On the local level, unfortunately, whether you like it or not, whether you believe it or not, whether you want to accept it or not, it really, the decisions that are being made in terms of local resources, how if your park is being fixed, if garbage is being picked up as equitably as it is in other neighborhoods, education, policing, whether it's done in a way where it's respectful, but still bringing down crime, transportation, all of that is done based on voter turnout. I'll pose you one scenario, and I won't take too long. If you are an elected official, and all of the elected officials that I've known over my 25 years in office, I believe that everybody has a good heart. And we've had exceptions, we've had rotten apples, and so on and so forth, but I believe that people make decisions as best they can to service as many people in their communities. But if you don't have all of the resources, then how do you make that priority? They make it because they have a database. They make that priority based on voter turnout. So if Block A has 1,000 voters that come out of it, and Block B has only 50 voters that come out of it, and they both need something of the same, maybe fixing potholes or a park that's fixed or more school seats. And even though the elected official would like to do it for everybody, but they can't, and they only have the resources to do it for one block, who do you think is gonna get the resources? It may not be fair, but you can fix it. It may not be something that you wanna accept, but you can fix it. And it's real, and it's about voter turnout. And this is the way that you help your elected officials as well when they go to a mayor or to a governor or to a US senator. Those people at higher than the local elected officials are looking at voter turnout to see what's the best political bang for their buck. So today is voter registration day, National Voter Registration Day. You have until October 9th. And this is the time now that any elected official at any level of government, whether this year or next year, if they did something that you really, really didn't like, if they voted on something or took away some services in your community that hit you to the core, that hit your bottom line, that hurt somebody in your family, that hurt somebody who's a next door neighbor, how is it that you get back? How is it that you let your voice be heard better than anything else? That is by voting. So do three things. Since we love education, we always talked about the 3 R's. Here's my 3 R's. Remember, register, and resist. This is your time now. Everybody has a lot to say. You hear all the political pundits, you hear all of the elected officials, and everybody has a lot of talking to do. Now it is up to you with your action. People have died, people have fought, people have risked their security, people have risked their peaceful living so that you can have this ability to be heard. You can go on internet, you can go on social media, you can feel yourself by having Twitter fingers, but ultimately what people will know and what people will hear is how you voted. Get out there and change the world. Thank you.
Thank you, President Diaz. Really appreciate it. Yep, DX. All right. Any questions in the chat? Is there any questions for our Bronx Borough President in the chat?
Jasmine, are there any?
No, not at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
All right, with that said, I see you all, okay?
Thank you, bye.
All right, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Peace.
All right, so we're gonna move forward with our programming. Today we have our esteemed professor. His name is Professor Leroy Gadsden, and he's gonna be talking to you about again, we're stressing the importance of the vote. We want to discuss the price that was paid for us minorities to vote, for women to vote. And we want him to explain to you why it's important for you to show up at the poll, whether you decide to do it electronically, meaning your absentee ballot, or you're gonna do like me, put on your mask, and I'm gonna walk to the poll, all right? So let's welcome and give a hand to Professor Gadsden.
Good afternoon, all. I'm glad that we could be here. First, let me start off by saying I can cut this very short. I agree with everything the borough president said, so that concludes my presentation. But nevertheless, I'm going to ask us if we could pull up the PowerPoint. As we're talking about voter registration day, and let's move right into that. The right to vote It really is the most important, sacred, cherished part of democracy. Nothing separates America more than any other country than the right to vote. If you don't like the way, or you wish to change the way your city look or your country look, the way to go about doing that is to vote, as the borough president was talking about. And it's pertaining to college students. Some of our greatest changes in American government was led by college students. Regardless of your background, regardless of whether you're poor or rich or in between middle income, your vote makes everybody equal, because there's equal power at the ballot box only if you use it. On our next slide, let's look at a basic background of some of the legislative law that was brought into effect to guarantee the right of citizens to vote. You would hope that the Constitution was enough, but there were laws put in place to guarantee we have the right to vote. We had the 15th Amendment. This was after the country, about 5 years after the country had finished a civil war, when there was a fight regarding the bondage of people of color for free labor. And so 1870, we had the 15th Amendment that was voted on and guaranteed by the right to vote. And then there was the United States court case in Breedlove, where they said the use of poll taxes was constitutional. The country agreed that it was constitutional in 1937 to allow poll taxes, which was discriminatory. And then in 1962, we prohibited the use of poll taxes in federal election. And then we continue on in background. In 1965, we had the Voters' Rights Act that was passed. And in 1966, the country, under the Supreme Court, in the Harker v. Virginia case, ruled that poll taxes of any level of elections were unconstitutional. And you might notice that's been a big issue in America now with the ID required for voting. It's been related to the form of poll tax that was ruled unconstitutional and illegal by the government. But if we move on, we consider this the hypocrisy of a nation, because even though we had the 15th Amendment that was passed in 1870, women and African Americans were still denied the right to vote in America. Okay, and then after the 19th Amendment, African Americans, including African American women, were still denied the right to vote. And when we look at women in this 19th Amendment, the 19th Amendment did not come easy for women, because they were not considered citizens either. They were considered second class because they would not have the right to vote. Women marched, protest, sacrifice, petition, all-night vigils, hunger strikes, did that for decades just to get the right to vote, because they realized the value in voting and the worth of a vote. Here were women that did not even have a right to vote, but they were fighting for the right to vote, and they did not give up, and they did not take no for an answer. Do not ever let anyone tell you your vote doesn't count, your vote does not matter. That is why some of the others try their best to keep certain people from voting, because our opponents, our adversary, they realize the importance of voting. That's why they put so many hurdles and obstacles over the decades to prevent certain people from voting, including women and minorities. In 1920, Congress, once again, elected officials that were voted upon, they passed the 19th Amendment to the Constitution, giving women the right to vote. Although it gave women the right to vote, it didn't prohibit gender discrimination. This did not apply to women of color. When we look at America, we see the voter suppression against African Americans. From 1870, after the 15th Amendment passed, until 1965, almost 90 years, America engaged in a campaign of denying people of color the right to vote. Even though it was legal for them to vote, the opportunity was denied. And America took great odds to do that, even though most of our history said it was in the southern states. Keep in mind, the southern states did all this denial with the permission and consent of the northern states in America. Some of the obstacles they put in the way to prevent people of color from voting, what we call the jelly bean test. In order for a person of color to vote, at the polling site, they had to tell how many jelly beans were in the jar. Another test that was used was the soap bubble test. In order to vote, you had to guess how many bubbles were in a bar of soap. These tests, and of course, there's no right answer, so you're going to get it wrong. These tests were not given to white voters. They were given to people of color to prevent them. And this is all this a means of voter suppression, and it continued. There were literature tests given. Remember now, people of color being first generation off the plantation was denied an education. Poll tax, where they charge you, you're poverty stricken, but they charge you to vote, which was a constitutional right supposed to be freely obtained by birth at the age of 18. Then there were whites on the primary. So if you were a person of color, you could not get into a white on the primary. Then there was a landowner requirement, which was, maybe did not say it on his face, but if your parents were slaves, you did not own any land. And so the landowner was not going to work. Then there was the grandfather clause, where if your grandfather voted, and during that time, most of our grandparents were on the plantation and they could not vote. But if your grandfather voted, which applied to white people, then you could vote. And when all that suppression did not work, we turned to killing and intimidation just to stop people from voting. When we think about this thing called the right to vote, we can never forget how many people of all race and nationality lost their life, shed their blood, just so that we could have a freedom to vote on election day. And there were many. I just picked out a few that was related. We have some kind of connection with. Our sister school, Medgar Evers College, a Cuny school, is named after Medgar Evers. He was an African-American male. This man was a World War II veteran, and what's amazing, even though he had fought for his country, when he still could not vote back home. He rode around the country registering people of color to vote, and he was told not to do this, and he refused. He continued, and one night he came home, and he was assassinated as his wife and young children looked on. Then there was Vernon Dharma, who was an African-American businessman. He was told the same thing. So when the Civil Rights Act was, the Voter Rights Act was passed, Vernon Dharma was a store owner. And what he did, he used his store to register people of color to vote. He also used his money to pay the poll tax that the state was asking for. And he was told not to do that. He didn't stop. And one evening, they firebombed his house and fired on his house, the Ku Klux Klan, that is. They fired on his house, he hid his house with his family there, and they firebombed the house. Well, he defended his house with his rifle and shotgun. However, never due to smoke inhalation, he died several days later, all because he registered Black folks to vote and paid the poll tax. His dying word is, if you don't vote, you don't count. And then there was someone near, almost our own age, Andrew Goodman, who was a son of New York. And Mr. Goodman was a Jewish young man who went to one of our sister schools at Queens College. And he voluntarily went to Mississippi in the heyday of the civil rights violence, June of 1964. And he volunteered and left New York City and went there. He was killed, lynched, really the first night in town he was lynched. And there was another son of New York we want to talk about near our own age was Mr. Michael Swerner, who was a 25-year-old Jewish student who just left Columbia University. He was a social work major and he went to Mississippi. He was one of the most despised and hated civil rights worker because of his knowledge. He was a great strategist. He knew how to plan events. He could be a great organizer. The Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan put out a murder warrant on him, killed on sight. He was lynched along with Mr. Goodman in June. Their bodies were buried in a dam, and for months, nobody could find the bodies, all because of work he was doing to register people of color to vote. And he was training people. He was a great trainer. He was training people to vote. Then there was Vowel Lizzio. She was out of Detroit, Michigan. After the Edmund Pettus Bridge March, she got concerned with the violence. She was a great organizer and civil rights activist. And so she went to Alabama to follow Dr. King in the marches. And after the third successful march, she was shuttling some people of color back home. And some Ku Klux Klan members saw her and they chased her for nearly 80 miles at 70 miles per hour. They rode up on her and they shot her in the head, killing her instantly at 75 miles per hour. All because she went to help out and guarantee the right that was supposed to be guaranteed by the Constitution of the United States of America. But she left her family and her livelihood just to go down there to do that. And so now we're coming, but even though there's a lot of killing and bloodshed and beatings, etc., the beatings, marches, and killings were not in vain. In August the 5th, 1965, the Voting Rights Act was passed, which prohibited the use of race to deny the right to vote. This was purchased at a tremendous cost of the loss of life, but it was paid in full. But we must know about this thing called the right to vote. The act was passed by elected officials, Congress, and signed by an elected official, President Johnson. The Voting Rights Act gives everyone in America today the right to vote. Does voting matter? We hear that question very often. We think about the late Khalif Browder, who was a fine young man. It was an elected official, the district attorney, who requested a surety bond that allowed Mr. Browder to sit in jail for nearly 3 years awaiting trial. An elected official was one who initiated that. We think about Roe v. Wade, whether a woman has a right to choose an abortion, wherever your views might be. But the question came before the United States Supreme Court, who made a decision. But keep in mind, those elected officials, the presidents, nominated those Supreme Court justices who made the decision, and they were confirmed by an elected body called Congress. We move right along. NYPD, you've heard of stop and frisk. Remember that it was an elected city council that voted to ban discriminatory stop and frisk by the police department. We saw over 680,000 people of color, Blacks and Hispanics, being illegally detained in violation of their Fourth Amendment right, which we discussed last week. Well, the elected city council voted to ban that. The elected mayor voted, he vetoed the bill. The elected city council came back and overrode the mayor's veto just by one vote. 32 votes to override that veto. Voting matters, makes a difference. And then we look at our just our local dealer activity. Stand your ground law in New York State. We defeated that because those laws been used to kill people of color throughout the country. That was defeated by the body. 18-year-olds can fight and die for their country in the military, but elected officials created legislation in New York State where if you're under 21, you cannot buy alcohol or cigarettes. And now keep in mind, alcohol and smoking is hazardous to your health. We just want to point it out how elect and voting affects you in your everyday life. Some youth employment, which is a part of a lot of our communities. And I worked some youth employment back in the summer years ago. Howsoever though, in April, the city council removed all the summer youth employment position out of the budget. And what happened when they did that, then some of our students and citizens petitioned the elected officials, and they had that put back in the budget. In July, the city council released a budget that included 350,000 summer youth employment position back into the budget. All that becomes the power of the vote. Taxes, for those of you who work, it's amazing. You have your paycheck, say your gross and your net is two separate things. When I received my first paycheck, my question was, who's FICA? But what happened was that because government determined your tax rate, whether you're a student, whether you're working full-time, whether you're inner city, outer city, suburb, etc., government officials, elected officials determine how much taxes taken out your paycheck, which determine how much money you bring home to spend. Sanitation, trash and snow collection in your community. The frequency is determined by a commissioner that was appointed by an elected governor by an elected mayor by the people. Public transportation, the frequency and cleanliness of your trains and subways. Once again, that commissioner appointed by the elected mayor of the city. Education, the quality of education. The chancellor now is having a lot of issues with opening schools up, but the elected mayor is the one that appointed the chancellor to control your schooling. Special alert, keep in mind, whoever you decide to vote for, but the next Supreme Court justice appointed by an elected president, confirmed by an elected Senate, will decide whether Roe v. Wade on abortion is going to be overturned or will it continue to stand as the law of the land. And then there's always that issue, if I'm unable to vote, what can I do? Well, you can do 1,000,001 things. If you don't have the citizenship status required and you cannot vote, you can still be involved and be a major player in the game, if I may say. One, you can popularize the notion of the importance of voting in your day-to-day conversations, within your friends and people that you associate with. Make sure they know how important it is to vote and make sure they vote. Especially in your relationship, make sure your other partner vote. Social media, you can encourage those who can to vote on your social media. Then you can serve as a poll watcher on election day. And as a poll worker, that's a paid position. And right now we've gone to new technology. We need people that can understand the technology and the polling site. You can also hold candidate forums in your community. You can hold candidates for, believe me, the candidates will come and you can bring up and raise those issues that you feel that's important to your community. You can also, you can campaign, volunteer for the candidate of your choice. Even though you're not a representative vote, you can help put him or her in office, and therefore you have an influence in them, and you can help them shape the politics or the government of your particular community because you have some, what they say, you have an investment in the process. Then you can always join a political club. Once you join the political club, and then you, once again, you can now show how you can be effective in the process of how they're going to govern your community. As we move on, then we also want to look at, in our community, we want to make sure we spread the word that you can also register people to vote, because you'd be surprised. The voter registration application, it might look simple, but if you do not fill it out correctly, believe it or not, it will be tossed out. A lot of people don't understand, they rush through it, and we have thousands of applications lost every week because people did not fill it out correct. And second, as a college student, you're the hope. You can influence people. You can influence people to uplift your community. Help us spread the word. Ex-offenders can vote in New York State. And help people understand, when they stay home and say they're not going to vote, this is how bad politicians and bad laws are made, because good people don't vote. It's on you. What will you do with your power? Many marched, many were beaten, and many died so you could have a voice. Who you choose is up to you. We want you to vote, and vote early. That concludes our presentation.
Thank you, Professor Gadsden. Is there any questions in the chat?
So yes, there is a question from Yvonne. She asked, how would the public go about petitioning their local elected officials?
Basically what you would do, identify your issue. You would look in, you can Google your district and find out the name and location of your local public official. It is best, and this my students did this past spring, contact them, write them or email them and let them know your issue. You are, especially if you're John Doe student. I am John Doe student. I am concerned about the trees in my neighborhood, the buildings, or the policing, and I'm asking you to do something about it. I welcome a meeting. A simple letter of your concern, email it to them. I will get my friends and my neighbors and relatives to sign off on your petition. The more people you can get to sign off on it, the better off you're going to be. You simply email that to the elected official, then you might follow up with a phone call. It's done, and make sure you put your contact information. It's just a simple letter, nothing fancy. You put in basically, what do you want? What are you demanding? And your contact information.
Thank you, Professor Gadsden. Jasmine, do we have any other question?
No, no additional question.
Okay. And if I can say one last thing pertaining to that last question, far too often the average citizen feel they do not have the power to influence elected officials. But elected officials, they read their email because they want to keep their job. That was something the borough president referring to earlier. If you want to make your demands known to them, they will respond. Howsoever, though, if you remain silent and do not make your demands known, then they do not feel the need to satisfy, respond to your needs because they don't know. And they know who vote.
Okay, thank you so much, Nicole.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Gadsden. So now we're gonna have our former BCC alumna. Her name is Kersey Martinez. She is part of the BCC's foundation board. She's a member on that board. She was also a former ASAP student. She's very active civically, so she's civically engaged, and her hope is to build a community and get people to get more civically active. Particularly, we're focusing on you guys, the millennials, right? Because you're the guys that's going to make the change. You're the ones that we Gen X are dependent on to make this change, make a positive change, and keep our progress moving forward, you know, effectively. So with no further ado, I want to present Ms. Kersey Martinez.
Hello, everyone. Happy National Voter Registration Day. It is an honor to be here. And yes, we are taking the first steps to get more civically engaged. So I want to speak to you about the census. And I want you to think about a food pantry when you think about the census. If you go to a food pantry, which are very popular nowadays, they would ask you, how big is your family? And depending, based on that number, you're gonna get an amount of food, right? The family that has 8 individuals will get a larger amount of food than the family who only has 3 members and 3 individuals. So the census is the same. If we register, right? If we put our names down in the census, our state will show that there is a larger amount of people in your state. So the more people that participate in the census, the larger amount of money, right? Billions in federal funding that our local communities will be receiving. So the census basically is, it counts every resident in the United States. It happens every 10 years. And it is very, very important that we are counted. Many times, I come from an undocumented community, right? Many times we are afraid. Many times we feel that if I put my name in a paper, if I let someone know about my status, I may get in trouble. But for the census, for this specific situation, you should not be afraid because you are just being counted as a person. There's not gonna be any collection of your data, you know, of your being documented or not being undocumented. So it's very important that you make yourself counted. And if you have any friends who are undocumented, it's important that you let them know that they are safe, because if they are counted on the census, our local communities can get more funding for hospitals, for schools, and for many things that we use on our everyday life. Another thing that's very important is that the census help determine the amount of members that will be in the House of Representatives. So that's also very important. The larger the number of the larger the population of a state, the more representation we will have in Congress. So this is why it's very important. Please, please fill it out and be counted. Another thing I want to share is about the importance of being civically engaged. I remember, so I'm a very proud BCC graduate, and I remember taking a political science class on my freshman year, and it was as if my whole world had changed. This class explained everything about who represents you, the importance of voting, and they were able to show how the machinery works. So I really do encourage you, even if you're a nursing major, if you're anything that's not related to politics, I encourage you to at least as an elective, take a introduction to political science class, because it will be very helpful. And we should really push for having political science classes included in our high school curriculums, because it's important for our citizens, for every resident in the United States to understand how things work. I have friends, American friends, who say to me, I don't need to vote. Why should I vote? They already decide who's gonna be the president. But no, we do have a voice. And voting is very important because you're not only electing the president or the elected officials at the federal level, you are also impacting those who are the elected officials in your local communities. And those are the people you want to know who are running the show, right? You want your friend to be in office. You want someone who cares about your community, someone who lives in your community, someone who suffers with you, to be in a position of honor so that they can also make decisions that can be beneficial to your community. So it's very important to be civically engaged. and many of us cannot vote, right? If you are not a United States citizen, you cannot vote. And this is something I learned many years ago. There were many undocumented people, right? That would be walking out in the street and somebody would be giving them a voter's registration slip, and without knowing, they would sign it. But that is very dangerous because that would not make you eligible to become legal in the future. So please, if you are not a US citizen, do not register to vote. That is a big, big no, and I wanna really stress that point. But if you are a US citizen, then do the opposite. Definitely register to vote because your voice does count. There are many, many of us who don't really have a voice when it comes to voting, right? We cannot go out to the polls, but you can. And we wish we had that power. So I really encourage you to use your power, the power of letting your voice be heard. And those of us who cannot go out and vote, we can encourage our friends. I have many friends who were born here and who have the power, but they don't really understand the machinery behind it all. And it's important to just explain it to them, and they would understand it and realize, yes, I should be voting. I am very fortunate and blessed to work with my assembly member, Assemblywoman Latoya Joyner. She's an elected official who represents the 77th district in the Bronx. And I really see the heart. I see her heart, because when you live in the community, when you know the people in the community, the seniors, the youth, you know what's needed there. That's why you need to elect the people within your community so they know what are the real needs that our community have. So please go out and vote, and please register for the census. It is our time now. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Thank you, Kersey. So as Kersey said, and Professor Gadsden says, remember, you have the power now to make that change. And I know I'm a Gen X, and I'm proud to be Gen X. We need you to go out and make that vote. Vote, get civically active, and hopefully we can move forward productively, right? So we're gonna move on with our programming, and we're gonna have NYPIRG do a little presentation on the ins and outs of how to register to vote, right? And that person doing that presentation, his name is Tausif Hassan. So let's give him a virtual welcome.
And Tausif, just so you're reminded you're on mute. Yep.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, sorry, I was just setting up the presentation. Can everyone see my screen right now?
Yes.
Awesome. Cool. So thank you all so much. I'm going to go ahead and take it from here. I also just want to say that the presentations that we've had so far were very compelling. I think we've heard a lot of great reasons about, why it's really important to vote right now. So I wanted to go ahead and, as my role, tell everyone about what are some of the more technical parts of voting. This is like a very, weird year because of COVID. A lot of things are digital, and you might be wondering, how does this change, how I'm going to vote, actually. So that's going to be my role today. And if you have any questions about the technical sides of voting, I'm a resource for that. So please go ahead and ask me anything that you'd like. So as you already know, my name is Tausif. I'm the NYPIRG project coordinator at BCC this year. Every single year, especially for the fall semester, we have this huge voter registration drive, right? And that's because during the fall, that's when the voter registration deadline happens in New York State. It's usually in October, and so that's why we always focus our voter registration efforts just as soon as students start to enter school in the fall. Before I move on, I just do want people to know that NYPIRG does work on several different issues, and voting is just one of them. And so these are the campaigns that we work on. We work on issues of hunger and homelessness. We're always partnering up with food pantries on campuses all across the state as a resource. We work on democracy issues, so that's where voter registration, voter outreach. This year, the census is included. We also work on things like campaign financing, right? Making sure that politicians are listening to the voice of the people, working class New Yorkers like us, instead of, just moneyed interests, large donors in New York City and New York State, which is unfortunately a big problem. We also work on issues of consumer protection. So we have a campaign for public banking right now, where we're fighting to get our public money out of Wall Street and out of the harmful industries that they're investing in. And we want to get back control of our money so that we could actually decide how to invest it ourselves. We work on the higher education campaign. Every single year we know that tuition is going up, and that's something that our politicians actually decide, right? In New York State, it's our state senators and our state assembly members. They're the ones who vote on how much we pay for school as a matter of public policy. And so a higher education campaign is focused on getting students together to make college more affordable. And eventually, CUNY used to be free. We want CUNY to be free again. So that's what we're working on. We work on environmental protection. We know that the climate crisis is getting worse and worse. We used to have to look at examples from across the decade to talk about the climate crisis. And now we just talk about what's been happening in the last couple of weeks. So there's really a sense that we need to start mobilizing faster and faster to fight the climate crisis. And our final campaign is mass transit. So if you're a New Yorker, you've taken the bus, you've taken the subway at some point, you know that it's a great public resource, but there's a lot that can be improved on. And so we're fighting to make those changes and advocate for them. So going back to the issue today, registering to vote, right? Why should you register? All those campaigns that I just talked about, your public officials, your elected representatives, just like Professor Gadsden said, these are people that we put in charge, right? They're the ones who are making these big decisions in our lives. And so if you're someone who cares about the climate crisis, right? Just this past summer, Con Edison had to deal with power outages because they weren't prepared for providing power in the age of the climate crisis. They actually kept the whitest and wealthiest neighborhoods in New York City with power, and the parts of the city that were cut off, there were poor Black and brown neighborhoods, right? So like Canarsie, Flatbush, East New York, these are the places that Con Edison just flipped the switch off for, and they kept it on for the whiter, wealthier parts of the neighborhood. Tuition hikes, right? We know that tuition has been going up since 2011. The governor calls it the rational tuition plan, right? These are things that our public officials are talking about. And one of the biggest reasons that they raise tuition on students is because they have this perception that students don't vote and therefore they don't care. And so we need to change that perception. Hunger and housing insecurity. In New York City, housing prices are higher than anywhere else in the country. Food also costs more than the rest of the country. We know through studies that we've done that almost half of CUNY students are food insecure, that they've had to choose between paying for a textbook or getting a meal that day, right? These are the kinds of situations we are facing on campus. Criminal justice reform. I know everyone knows about the Black Lives Matter movement and the conversation around, policing and police brutality that's really been picking up steam recently. Like everyone said, it's our elected representatives that decide how much money our police get, right? How big a role that they play in society, what is their duty in our communities. This is a huge conversation that's really getting robust. And if you want to make an impact on this conversation, you have to vote, because at the end of the day, our elected representatives are the ones who are making these decisions. So, those are just a couple of the things, right? Really anything that's political is something that you need to vote for because it's your elected representatives who are deciding these issues. So down to the technical stuff. How can I register to vote? So there are a couple of ways that you can register to vote right now, and this is an updated informational, including everything that you need to know about COVID, right? So right now, we're focused on making sure that students are able to register and confirm that they can vote virtually, right? So here are the 4 ways. You could go to my DMV portal. So that's a link that basically lets you interact with the New York State DMV. I'm going to be putting these links in the chat as I'm speaking. But the DMV is a way in which a lot of folks have registered to vote. And so if that's something that you want to do, I'm going to go ahead and put that link in the chat. You could also register to vote with a Cuny D form. So NYPIRG actually was a huge advocate of the Cuny D form. And what that means is, in addition to the state knowing, like where you live, what your age is, these are things that you put on the form when you register. With the Cuny D form, they also know that you're a Cuny student. And that's really important because that's the main way that we can go up to our elected representatives and advocate and say, hey, you can't raise tuition this year because look at how many Cuny students have registered to vote. And all we have to do is point to the voter registration rolls, and we can show them how many students have filled out a Cuny D form. And that's only a form that's available when you're on campus with a partnership through Cuny. You can print a form with the New York State Board of Elections, and they'll mail it to you. And finally, we have a Cuny voter registration project, and we're working with Cuny to actually sign you up so that you get a voter registration right to your door. It's super simple. I'm going to put these links after I'm done presenting because it's going to be a bit confusing to do both at once. But all these links are ready, and I'm going to fire them off when I'm done. I'm also going to take a second right now to go through the physical voter registration form because I've been registering students to vote for years, and a lot of them look at the form and they get intimidated, and they go, no, I don't want to register to vote. That's okay. It's really a super simple form, and I just want to run it down with you guys so that you see how simple it is. So they ask you very basic questions. 1, are you a citizen of the US? As was mentioned before, you need to be a citizen in order to register to vote. So if you are not a citizen, if you have anything other than full citizenship status, if you're undocumented, if you have a visa but not full citizenship, do not try to register to vote because you can actually get into a lot of trouble. But if you are a citizen, just check off yes on the first question. 2, are you 18 or will you be 18 on election day? So if you are 18, you can register to vote. Just check off yes. If you are not 18 right now, but you'll be 18 by the day that you can vote, you can check off no, but you can still register to vote and you will be able to vote on that day. So if I'm 17 now, but I turn 18 the day before the election, right? November 2nd, for example, I can still register to vote and I will be able to vote on election day. If you are between 16 and 18, you could actually pre-register to vote. That's actually something that happened last year. NYPIRG was a huge advocate in that fight. So you can fill out this voter registration form starting when you're 16. And then when you're 18, you will automatically be registered to vote. Section 3, this is just your name. Simple as that. Really don't have to say any more than that. Questions 4, 5, 6, and 7. So you need to fill out your birthday because they need to verify that you're old enough to register to vote. But fun fact, here in New York State, you do not have to fill out your gender, your phone number, or your email address. You could if you want to. The Board of Elections will have it, and they might send you relevant updates. But you do not need to put down that information. All you have to put down is your birthday. I think it's really cool and progressive that in New York State, you don't have to identify as a gender in order to register to vote. So that's something cool that I want to point out. But yeah, all you need to do for that section is just put down your birthday. Your address. You need to put down your full address because that's part of voter registration. So your street address, your apartment number, city, town, the county. That's always something that a lot of students ask me about, like what county am I in? It's just your borough. So if you're in Queens, it's Queens County. If you're in Brooklyn, that's actually Kings County. And if you're in Staten Island, that's Richmond County. But for every other borough, it's just Bronx County, New York County, or Manhattan County. It's a person going over this. So even if you write, Staten Island or Brooklyn, they get it, So the address where you receive mail, you don't need to fill that out if you get mail at your home address. That's just for some folks who live in one address but receive mail in another address, because that is something that the Board of Elections has to sort through. Voting history. Have you voted before? You have to fill that out. And from what I understand, just fill it out to the best of your ability. So if you voted before and you don't remember what year you voted, that's not fatal. I usually try to help people remember, like, is the presidential election the last year you voted? Okay, so that's 2016, for example. But, just fill it out to your best of your ability. This is just the Board of Elections way of making sure that they don't have your name twice on the roll. So that's just to help them out there. If your voting information has changed, this is if you're registering again, but let's say you have a different name. More often than not, it's people who have moved. So if you moved, you have to re-register. And finally, well, we're almost to the last point, identification. And so this is necessary. Number 13, you need to do only one, right? You don't have to do both. So if you have a DMV license, just put your DMV number and check off that box. If you don't, or if you want to put your last 4 digits of your social, put your last 4 digits of your social and check off that box. If you don't have either, you check off that last box that says, I don't have a license and I don't have a social security number. You can still vote. You can still vote if you check off that last box. What will happen is at the voting poll, the poll worker is required to ask you for a form of ID to make sure that you are who you say you are, if you don't give them your DMV number or your social security number. So it's up to you. I tell people that if you have your DMV or your last 4 social, just do that, because it makes it easier. It makes sure that you don't have to go through that one extra step when you go to the polls. But it's personal preference.
I was listening to the whole time. I've been telling people to do it.
Whoever's speaking right now, can you please mute yourself? Thank you.
Thank you, Tiffany. So now we're at the end. This gets a lot of people tripped up, so please pay attention to this. In New York State, you have to check one of these boxes for a political party, right? So this is if you want to enroll in a political party. You have Democrat, Republican, Conservative, Working Families. There are a bunch of parties in New York State. These are the ones that you could register with. You also have the option of registering with no party. So I have 2 things to say. First, NYPIRG is nonpartisan. I'm not going to tell you which party to register with. If you want to register with the party, you check off their box. If you don't want to register in a party, you have to check off the no party, right? But you have to check off a box. Otherwise, your form is not valid. The second thing that I will say is that New York State has closed primaries. What that means is, if you've been paying attention to the whole political election cycle, you know that primaries are a big deal. Arguably in New York State, which is a majority Democratic state, primaries are even more important than the general, arguably, right? So if you want to vote in the primaries in New York State, you have to be registered with that party. For example, if I wanted to vote in the Democratic primaries this year, I would need to be a registered Democrat on this form. If I wanted to vote in the Republican primaries this year, I need to be a registered Republican on this form. If I am not registered in that party and I try to go vote in that primary, I will not be allowed to vote in the primary. Okay? I know that this is something that I'm really harping on right now, but this is from experience, and this is not students' fault. It's very confusing. The system is very bad at, being able to give you your rights. So it's not your fault. It's just very confusing, but that is the reality in New York State. If you want to vote in the primaries, you have to be very careful about which box that you select. We tell people that in New York State, when we register folks to vote, we highly encourage them to vote in the primaries because that's just one extra level of participation that you have. But if you don't, that's up to you. I can't force you to. 15, these are optional, right? If you want to apply for an absentee ballot or you want to be considered to be an election day worker. If you want an absentee ballot, which a lot of folks are, that's if you're not going to be here on election day or for whatever other reason, you check off that box. If you are interested in being an election day worker, make sure that you have the day off. You can make some money and you get to be a part of the political process and help out your community. Check off that box. I have to say, if you check off the box to be an election day worker, it's not guaranteed. So don't be upset if they don't reach back out to you. But it is very important, and if you're interested, check it off. You never know if they're going to select you or not. Finally, just make sure, number 16, that you sign and date, right? This is just, to make sure that everything on your form is kosher. Sign it, date it. If you don't sign it and you don't date it, your form is invalid. It's as simple as that. So I know that I took a long time to explain it, but filling out the form takes a minute, I swear. It literally takes a minute. It's super simple. And now that I've gone over this, I'm sure that it's a bit easier for you to navigate and hopefully for you to help other students to register to vote as well. So what now? NYPIRG is doing a lot on voter registration right now, next year, next semester, all the time, right? We also work on all these other campaigns that we talked to you about. Follow us on social media if you want to know what's going on. We post every day. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. So if you just follow BCC NYPIRG, you type that in, you're going to find us. Join the Civic Olympics. So we have a friendly competition for voter registration and census right now. I'm going to be posting all this as like the flurry of links that I'm doing right after my presentation is done. But the Civic Olympics is a statewide competition to kind of spice things up. You and other students on campus are competing against each other to see who can register the most folks to vote, to see who can get the most folks to fill out the census. So if that's something that you'd be interested in, I'm going to post the link in just a second. My name's Tausif Hassan. My name's Tausif Hassan. That's my contact information. So if you need me for anything, if you have any questions, we also are accepting interns. So if this is something that you want to do and you really just want a semester-long internship where you get immersed in all of this and you get skills that are valuable and you really learn a lot about politics, go ahead and email me and we could chat about that offline. And finally, sign up on our student network. I'm going to post all these links after I'm done. The student network is so that you could be on our mailing list. We'll let you know about any events and activities that we have. But yeah, that's all for me. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, and I'm going to start posting all of the links that I promised. But is there time for Q&A? I've got time if we're still doing that right now.
Jasmine, do we have any questions?
Yes. So there is a question, and they wanted to know, what does NYPIRG mean?
NYPIRG stands for New York Public Interest Research Group. It's not the most eloquent acronym, I'll go ahead and say that, but the idea is that we are a nonprofit, student-run activist organization. We have chapters not just at BCC, but on campuses all over the state, mostly Cuny and mostly SUNY. And so we organize public college students on campaigns that they're really interested in. And our student board of directors is made up of college students from all of our different campuses, and they're the ones who decide what our priorities are. So the campaigns that I talked to you about before, they're actually deciding every single year, these are the issues that we care about as students, and it's my job and other staffers' jobs at NYPIRG to just help students coordinate. So I know that students brought up before, what's the best way to actually lobby your legislator if there's like an issue that you care about? That's one of the things that we teach students, right? So students are interested in fighting against the climate crisis, for example, and they want their elected representative to sign on to a bill that they believe will help fight the climate crisis. We actually help them reach out to other students on campus, find students in the district, and schedule a meeting with the legislator. So all of these are skills that we actually teach students on campus.
Thank you. Is there another question, Jasmine?
No, not at the, well, yes. So should voters that are already registered check on their voting status? If so, why? That's a great question.
Yeah, I think that you should check on your voting status before every election. Honestly, it's really sad that that's the case. But we've seen that the Board of Elections is, they have made a lot of mistakes in the past. A lot of people think that they're registered and they're not. And it's not your fault. The Board of Elections might have done something wrong. So just to be safe, we recommend just see if you're registered to vote, right? And you could Google, am I registered to vote? I'm not going to say there's one website because there are multiple websites dedicated to this. Am I registered to vote in New York State? And then you just put in your name, your address, and it will show you in like 1 second if you're registered to vote. If you are, great. If you're not, then you still have time. You have up until the 26th to actually get a form mailed to your door to register to vote. And that's what all these links that I just pasted in the chat are for, to get your form.
Awesome. Thank you, Jasmine. Was that the last question that you had?
Yes.
Okay. And just to let everybody know, I know that some people asked if Tausif can repeat himself in certain areas. Well, after this session, we are going to have breakout rooms in which Tausif, the SGA, our BCC alumni, and the DACA student representative Yamilet will be in these breakout rooms. So if you did want to connect with them, if you did have any follow-up questions, or wanted to have more of a one-on-one session with one of these individuals, you'll have the opportunity at the end. So thank you so much, Tausif, for this. Nicole?
Okay, so we're gonna move on with our schedule. So we're gonna have 2 videos played, one by our BCC student government president, her name is Priscilla, and then the next one is gonna be by our student senator, Todd Forbes. So I'm gonna present the screen so that way I can get it played, okay? Oops. No. And everyone can see the screen, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Greetings, students. My name is Priscilla Toko, and I am your student government president. And on behalf of the Student Government Association, we wish you all a wonderful semester. As a student, your first priority is your academics. Stay on top of your schedule, and please do log on to the BCC website at www.bcc.cuny.edu and utilize all the resources that have been made available. The Student Government Association, also known as the SGA, are your student representatives. So please do not be shy to reach out to us for any questions, concerns, or if you are just bored. You could always email us at sga@bcc.cuny.edu. Also, do follow us on Instagram at sga_bcc_cuny, on Twitter at bcc_sga, and on Facebook at bcc_sga to get updates on what is happening in the school. SGA senators, we have a civic duty to you, and you have a civic duty to your community to vote this and every election period. We cannot let our rights go unused and abused. Also, if this is your first time voting in any type of election, it will be a very important one. And by the time spring 2020 comes rolling, you would be a pro when it comes to voting in the BCC student government elections. So make sure you register to vote if you can. Request and mail out your absentee ballot, or go out and have your voice heard at the polls. If you can't register to vote, there are other ways you could get involved, and you will hear more about that today. It was great speaking to you. I hope to meet you all in the breakout rooms later. Bye.
So that was Priscilla, and now we're gonna do Senator Todd Forbes.
Hello, BCC students and outside family and friends. My name is Todd Forbes, SGA Senator. And we have an obligation coming up in only a few months. This is something our ancestors fought for, many beaten for, and some of them even lost their lives in the pursuit of it. The thing I'm talking about can bring about change, can bring hope, and even has the power to start a revolution. The thing I'm talking about is voting. So please do us a favor and grab and encourage your father, mother, brother, and sister, and anybody over the age of 18, and bring them on down to the voting polls. Or you can request, fill, and submit your absentee ballot. Please do your civic duty. Please be responsible and let your voices be heard and vote. This has been Todd Forbes. Thanking you in advance. And have a blessed day. Signing off.
So those were our two representatives from SGA, the Student Government Association at BCC. So let's give them a virtual round of applause. And you guys will be able to meet and conversate with them during the breakout sessions, ask them anything as it relates to your civic activism, right? So the next person I have the pleasure of introducing is Ms. Yamilet Martinez. She is a DACA student at BCC, and she's also a part of the ASAP Women Empowerment Committee. Ms. Yamilet Martinez is very passionate about creating a sense of community, right? So this is her opportunity. She's going to share her story and her hopes and aspirations with you guys. So I hope you're moved and moved into action, right? We don't want you to leave this event and no action is taken. So we want action right after this event, right? Go out and vote. So now we have Ms. Yamilet Martinez.
Hi, everyone. I'm Yamilet. I am a current student at BCC, student member of the ASAP Women Committee, and a DACA recipient. It is imperative to act and get civically engaged as young adults because the future of America depends on us. And it's in our hands. We all witness the racism and injustice, and we all are dealing with the consequences of an egocentric administration who does not believe in science and is only worried about the economy, right? The outbreak of the pandemic in the US could have been prevented, and it wasn't. Our earth is burning up, and there's so much to do, yet they continue to do nothing and continue to worry about the economy and what benefits, their social class. I decided to get civilly engaged for many reasons. As I mentioned before, I am a DACA recipient, and which stands for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. It was created back in June 2012 by the Obama administration. It is an immigration policy that gives young adults temporary protection. It has given me the opportunity to work in the US and pursue an education. The current administration has kept this category of young adults in a limbo. One of the first things Trump did when he took office was remove DACA. And ever since then, it's been crazy for us. It's been a continuous battle. And as of now, new applicants are not accepted. And for the ones that have DACA already, like me, now we have to renew our permission every year instead of 2 years, how it originally was. So that's more money coming out of our pockets, right? Another reason that I decided to get in civilly engaged was for the gravity of the injustice and violation done by this administration, for the children and mothers who fled Latin America. They're locked up in cages, they're abused and living in hard conditions. Families, once they get there, they get separated, mothers on one side, children's on the other, and no sort of communication. Cells are extremely cold. They take showers like once or twice a week. And I mean, it gets even worse. Unfortunately, I do not have the privilege to vote like many of you do, but I do have a voice, and every single one of us do, right? Doesn't matter where we come from, doesn't matter our color, doesn't matter nothing. As long as we live in the US, we have a voice. So I'll be working in the polls and encouraging my friends, co-workers, and my neighbors, you know, anybody who I can approach to vote, right? Those who can, and those who cannot vote. I encourage you all to, you know, take action and motivate others, and work in polls and help your community out, and try to get as much engaged as possible, because what's coming up, it really depends on us. And together, you know, there's more of us than them. So if we really want a better future for ourselves and for our people, then we have to start today, right? Let's not wait for tomorrow. Let's start getting this going. If we could, you know, we would register to vote, but unfortunately that's not possible. So my voice, your voice is like my microphone. I could only go halfway, and you're projecting my voice, and everybody else who cannot vote. So with that being said, thank you very much for being here, and I hope that we can all, you know, strive for better. And take care, everybody.
Thank you, Yamilet. That was very powerful and moving. So definitely, I would be your microphone, right? So right now we're gonna get ready to close off, but we have breakout rooms where you can meet with, one room will be Miss Yamilet, Kersey, and then SGA members that can answer questions for you based on what they discuss. You know, they'll share their experience and how they got civically engaged. Then we would have NIPERG, which is Tausif, who's going to explain a little bit more in detail about your voter registration process, and even getting active, you know, if you're not eligible to vote. He can be able to discuss with you in detail how, you know, you can get active and, you know, help with the voting processes if you wish. And then we have our third breakout room with Professor Leroy Gadsden, who is going to discuss, again, the power of the vote. He's going to talk to you more about what price was paid for us, Black and Browns, yes, us, Black and Browns, to vote, and why it's important to vote. So he'll be talking to you a little bit more about that process. All right? So I hope you enjoy these breakout rooms. You take the opportunity to network. Again, it takes a village for change to happen. And I know I'm passionate about change. I'm a mom, I'm a Black woman. I have Black sons. So, and I've been stopped by the cops a couple of times, pulled out and searched and stuff. So take this opportunity to meet with everyone, network, and gain as much information as you possibly can. The more knowledge you know about your rights, whether it's voting rights or your civil rights, the better for you, right? And remember, whether you're not an American citizen or not, you do have a voice. And use your platform to project that voice, all right? So Tiffany, with further ado, you could take it from here.
So I did, I do have the breakout rooms ready. Just please, as I stated in the chat, just message me with whichever breakout room preference you have. If you are not interested in a breakout room, then thank you so much for attending today. Thank you so much for giving us your time. For National Voter Registration Day, we will send out, there has been a broadcast with links to go out and register to vote, and to get other people involved. And you all have my contact information. You have Nicole's contact information. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. But thank you all so much. I will be opening breakout rooms now.
And as stated here on this slide, you will see all who were involved in putting this event together. It couldn't be done. Teamwork makes the dream work. So Student Life, Criminal Justice Department, NIPERG, the Social Justice Network, ASAP, History Department, Social Sciences Department, and Student Government. And remember, every vote counts. I can't stress that. Every vote counts. Thank you for attending, everyone.
And for those of you who are requesting to be in breakout rooms, you should be receiving a pop-up message on your window letting you know that you can move on to the breakout room now. So please go ahead and enter your breakout rooms. And to my co-hosts, if any of you receive breakout room requests, let me know.
Professor, you want me to go over to Professor Gadsden? I guess one of each could, you know.
Yeah, each of you can go into the different breakout rooms. I'm gonna stay here in the main room. I do have a student right now who requested to be in Professor Gadsden's room, but they still haven't joined, so.
Okay. So I'll go